Have you ever walked into church on Sunday, seen a familiar face, started a conversation, and then felt that moment of panic? That moment when you realize you have absolutely no idea what this person's name is, even though you've met them 5 times before. I'm Margaret Wilson, a retired high school English teacher of 32 years, and despite spending my career memorizing the names of over 100 students each semester, I found myself struggling more and more with name recall after retirement. It was embarrassing, it was frustrating, and it was affecting my confidence in social situations. Until I discovered a simple memory technique that changed everything. I'll never forget the Sunday that finally pushed me to do something about my failing name memory. It was after service, during our monthly potluck. I was serving myself some of Betty's famous potato salad. At least I thought it was Betty's, when the woman behind the table smiled warmly at me. "Margaret, so good to see you. How's your grandson doing with his college applications?" She knew my name. She knew about my grandson Matthew's college search. And I had absolutely no idea who she was. I mumbled something about Matthew doing well, thanked her for the potato salad, and quickly moved along, feeling a wave of shame wash over me. As I sat down at a table, I realized this wasn't the first time this had happened. Or the second, or even the 10th. I was constantly forgetting names at church, at the grocery store, at community events. And the worst part, I was starting to avoid social interactions altogether. I'd duck down aisles at the supermarket if I saw someone I recognized but couldn't name. I'd arrive at church just as service began and leave immediately after to avoid those awkward conversations. Me, a former teacher who prided herself on connecting with students, hiding from social interactions because I couldn't remember names. It felt like I was losing a part of myself. That night after the potato salad incident, I went home and did something I'd been avoiding. I Googled, "Why can't I remember names anymore?" What I discovered surprised me. First, I wasn't alone. Studies show that forgetting names is one of the most common memory complaints across all age groups. But what really caught my attention was learning that being bad with names isn't actually a fixed trait, it's a habit. For years, I'd been telling myself, I'm just bad with names, as if it were as unchangeable as my height or eye color. But the research suggested otherwise. Our brains are fully capable of remembering names, regardless of age. The difference between people who remember names well and those who don't often comes down to 3 things. 1. Paying deliberate attention when being introduced to. Creating meaningful associations with the name 3. Practicing recall techniques, I realized I'd been giving myself an excuse instead of a solution. And as a teacher who spent decades helping students overcome learning challenges, I knew better than that. Before I share the technique that worked for me, it's important to understand why we forget names in the first place. And it's not necessarily because of age-related memory decline, though that can be a factor. The primary reason we forget names is surprisingly simple. We never truly learned them in the first place. Think about it. When you're introduced to someone new, especially in a social setting like church, where you might meet several people in quick succession, there's a lot happening at once. You're thinking about making a good impression. You're processing what the other person is saying. You're possibly distracted by other people nearby or worried about what you'll say next. During all this, someone's name is mentioned once, very briefly. Your brain simply doesn't have the chance to process and store that information properly. The second reason is that names are often arbitrary. Unlike other facts about a person, like their profession or where they live, names usually don't have inherent meaning that connects to the person. Sarah doesn't look more like a Sarah than a Jennifer. There's no logical connection to help your memory. Understanding these challenges was my first step toward solving my name recall problem. After researching memory techniques, I found one approach that seemed both effective and natural enough to use in everyday situations like church gatherings. I call it the 3 R's: register, relate, and repeat. Let me break it down. First, register the name consciously when you hear it. This means actually focusing your full attention when someone says their name. It sounds obvious, but most of us are thinking about what we'll say next instead of truly listening. I now make a point to pause my internal dialogue and really hear the name. Second, relate the name to something meaningful. This is where the magic happens. Our brains remember information better when it's connected to something we already know, or something vivid and unusual. For example, when I met David from our church choir, I pictured him with a slingshot facing Goliath, since he was quite tall. For Linda from the prayer group, I noticed her beautiful eyes and thought, Linda has lovely eyes to see with. For Robert, who always wears colorful ties, I thought Robert is robustly dressed. These associations might seem silly, and they often are, but that's partly why they work. Our brains remember unusual, vivid, or humorous connections better than ordinary ones. The third R is repeat. I try to use the person's name naturally in conversation right after being introduced. It's nice to meet you, Jennifer. Then again, when saying goodbye, I enjoyed talking with you, Jennifer. But here's a crucial step many people miss. I also mentally repeat the name along with my association several times after the conversation ends. David the tall giant slayer. David from choir. David the giant slayer. This helps move the name from short-term to long-term memory. The Sunday after my research, I decided to test my new approach. I arrived at church early, took a deep breath, and promised myself I would focus on remembering at least 3 new names. The first person I met was a woman who had recently started attending our church. As we were introduced, I heard Caroline and immediately registered it. I noticed her curly hair and thought, Caroline has curly hair. Both start with C, I said. It's wonderful to meet you, Caroline, and used her name again before we parted ways. Next was a gentleman named Frederick who mentioned he was a retired firefighter. In my mind, I saw Frederick in a firefighter's helmet, Frederick the firefighter, with flames starting with F all around him. The image was vivid and a bit silly, which made it stick. By the end of that Sunday, I had successfully remembered 5 names using my 3 R's technique. It wasn't perfect. I still struggled with a couple of people, but it was progress. Real, measurable progress. The following week, I spotted Caroline and Frederick before service. I took a moment to recall my associations, curly-haired Caroline, Frederick the firefighter, and then approached them confidently, using their names. The look of pleasant surprise on their faces was worth all the effort. They felt seen and valued. And honestly, I felt like my old self again. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. That's great, Margaret, but what about when you don't hear the name clearly? Or when the name is unusual or difficult to pronounce? These are valid concerns, and I've faced them myself. Here's how I handle these common challenges. If I don't hear a name clearly, I've learned to simply say, "I'm sorry, could you repeat your name?" I want to make sure I get it right. People are never offended by this. In fact, they appreciate the effort you're making. For unusual or difficult names, I ask the person to spell it or explain its origin. This not only helps me remember, but often leads to interesting conversations about cultural heritage. I met a woman named Siobhan at a church fundraiser and learned her name is Irish and pronounced Siobhan. That conversation about her Irish grandparents gave me multiple memory hooks for her name. Another challenge is remembering names over time. For this, I created what I call my church community journal. After services, I jot down the names of people I met or reconnected with, along with my memory associations and a few details from our conversation. Before the next Sunday, I review my notes. This practice has strengthened my recall tremendously. What started as a quest to stop forgetting names at church has brought unexpected benefits to my life. Benefits that go far beyond just avoiding embarrassment. First, my overall memory has improved. By exercising these memory muscles regularly, I've noticed I'm better at remembering other things too, where I put my keys, items on my shopping list, appointments without checking my calendar as often. Second, my social connections have deepened considerably. When you remember someone's name, they feel valued. But when you also remember details about their lives, their children's names, their recent knee surgery, their trip to Arizona, they feel truly seen and appreciated. I've formed more meaningful friendships at church in the past year than in the previous 5 years combined. People have commented that I'm such a good listener or so thoughtful. Little do they know it started with me just trying to remember their names. Third, and perhaps most significantly, my confidence has returned. I no longer dread social gatherings or avoid eye contact in the church lobby. I approach people with confidence, secure in the knowledge that I'll either remember their name or have techniques to handle it gracefully if I don't. This confidence has spilled over into other areas of my life. I've started volunteering to lead small groups at church, something I would have avoided before due to fear of forgetting participants' names. One concern I often hear when sharing these techniques with my fellow seniors is, isn't it too late to improve my memory? I'm in my 70s. My answer is an emphatic no. While it's true that some aspects of memory can decline with age, our brains maintain neuroplasticity, the ability to form new connections and learn new skills throughout our lives. In fact, research suggests that actively engaging in memory exercises and learning new techniques can help maintain cognitive function as we age. By challenging your brain to remember names, you're essentially giving it a healthy workout. I started this journey in my late 60s, and within months, I saw significant improvement. Some of my friends from church have adopted these techniques in their 70s and 80s with similar success. The key is consistency and patience. You won't remember every name perfectly after trying these techniques once. But with practice, you'll get better and better. And remember, even memory experts forget names sometimes. The difference is they have strategies to handle those moments gracefully, and they don't let occasional lapses discourage them from continuing to try. While my memory journey began with trying to remember names at church, I quickly found these skills transferable to every area of my life. At my monthly book club, I'm now able to keep track of who made which comments about the book, making for much richer discussions. When meeting my grandson's teachers at school events, I remember not just their names, but details about their teaching styles and feedback, which helps me support his education more effectively. Even at routine places like my doctor's office or local pharmacy, remembering the names of staff has transformed transactional interactions into warm, personal exchanges. The principles remain the same regardless of setting. Register the name consciously, relate it to something memorable, and repeat it in conversation and mentally afterward. And here's something that might surprise you. These techniques work just as well for young people. I've taught them to my grandchildren, who use them at school to remember classmates and teachers' names. My 14-year-old granddaughter told me it's helped her feel more confident during her first year of high school. No matter your age or situation, the ability to remember names is a valuable social skill that opens doors and builds connections. As I look back on my journey from hiding in church hallways to confidently engaging with my community, I'm reminded of something important. Our brains are remarkable organs capable of growth and adaptation at any age. What began as an embarrassing struggle has become one of the most rewarding learning experiences of my retirement years. I've not only improved my memory, but also deepened my connections, increased my confidence, and discovered a new passion for understanding how our minds work. If you're struggling with remembering names, whether at church, in your community, or anywhere else, I hope you'll try the 3 R's technique: register, relate, and repeat. Give yourself grace during the learning process, celebrate small victories, and keep practicing. Start small. Choose just 3 people to focus on next time you're at a gathering. Apply the technique consistently and watch your abilities grow over time. Remember that becoming better at remembering names isn't just about avoiding embarrassment, though that's certainly a nice benefit. It's about honoring the people in your life by acknowledging one of their most personal possessions, their name. When we make the effort to remember someone's name, we're saying, "You matter to me. You're worth remembering." And in our increasingly disconnected world, that simple act of recognition can be incredibly powerful. I'd love to hear your experiences with these memory techniques or any questions you might have. Leave a comment below and let's continue this conversation. And if you found this helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. This is Margaret Wilson, signing off with a challenge. Learn one new name this week using the techniques we've discussed. Your brain and your community will thank you for it.